The moment our fellow geeks, dweebs, nerds, and other unfortunates have been fervently waiting for has finally arrived. It's time for TMI, Confessionals of the Nerd Kind. And now, your hosts, Jeff Nerf Herder Chandler, Jim Kaiju Baker, and Christina Yojimbo Henry. You can continue. And now, let's get on with the show. Here is TMI.
I've seen Phantasm too, but it's been so long I haven't.
It was quite a while since I've seen this one. So, but do we want to talk news first? Because we do have some news. And welcome who's listening. If there's anybody out there, hello, crickets.
Yes, welcome.
I think Jim should actually start this episode with a hoot and owl. A little scary. So, want to do news?
Let's do news.
Okay, and then we'll get into Phantasm. And what's the other movie we're talking about today?
Bubba Ho-Tep.
Bubba Ho-Tep. Oh, yeah, it's going to be fun. Okay. All right. So let's see. First news item of the day. We can't go a week without talking about either the movie theaters or Disney. Disney has announced that they are dropping Pixar's new movie Soul on Disney Plus Christmas Day. No added money needed. If you have a subscription, it's yours for free to watch. So I thought that was that's probably the best thing for them to do.
I'm surprised they're not at least trying to like have a rental period like they did with Onward. You know, where it was available. It wasn't just available on Disney Plus. It was available on all platforms.
Right. Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think this movie's really getting a lot of buzz. Well, Pixar tends to play storylines really tight to the vest, especially in those early trailers. So I'm not entirely sure I know what it is about. I do know that Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey are in it, and that it is co-directed by Pete Docter and Kemp Powers. But beyond that,
maybe Mulan has something to do with it because the controversies around the price and some other aspects of that movie. Maybe they're trying to save face and put a little goodwill out there.
Here's a free Christmas gift here, kids. So I don't know. Anyway, so that's Christmas Day. So maybe we'll review it. Maybe we won't. I don't know. We'll probably still be in horror mode.
I don't think that you can take 3 months of it.
Oh, I mean, you're either going to kill me or you're going to just convert me straight up.
Yeah, you're going to be so hardened that you'll be even worse than the two of us combined.
Yes. Yeah, making up for 50 years of lost time. Watching Exorcist 4. Next news item. I'm going to list a bunch of things and you tell me what they have in common. Haunted Mansion, The Country Bears, Tomorrowland, Pirates of the Caribbean.
They are Disney attractions
that have been made into
movies.
Mm-hmm.
So Disney has announced that we have a new attraction that is being turned into a movie. Any guesses?
Space Mountain.
If you know it, you know it. Space Mountain. Is there a storyline involved with Space Mountain? It's a roller coaster in the dark, right? So what are we making a story about here? We are now, I'll tell you what, I actually stayed away from Pirates of the Caribbean for years. And one day someone's like, no, you seriously have to watch this movie. And when I sat down and watched it, I was ashamed of myself because I loved it.
But it's the only one of those kind of, attraction movies that's actually really good.
Good. Right.
Yes. Yeah. Even counting the sequels to Pirates is really...
Yeah, by the time they got to the fourth one, it was a little...
but the Haunted Mansion, I don't know what they were thinking with that.
That was the Eddie Murphy, right?
That was the Eddie Murphy movie.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen The Country Bears. Yeah.
I had a kid who really loved the Country Bears ride. Okay. So when we came home from Disney World, he wanted to watch the Country Bears movie, but he was only 5. So
there you go. Listen, that's fair enough. I think there was a couple more, but I couldn't think of them. Was Mission to Mars? Was that based on?
I don't think so.
I don't think it was based on the ride.
And the Tower of Terror, I think it was a TV movie.
Yes, it was.
Right. All right. But anyway, so they grabbed this guy, Joby Harold, who's now in the midst of rewriting the entire Obi-Wan Kenobi series. And he's supposed to be writing this script. But I guess he's got a lot of leeway because there's really nothing to hang your hat on other than the title. They're grasping. So, but speaking of Obi-Wan, Ewan McGregor was on the Graham Norton show, and he has confirmed that production for the Obi-Wan series will begin in March.
So this is going to be Obi-Wan on Tatooine.
Well, so the thing is that part of the reason that it was delayed, not only because of COVID, but what I understand is that initially it was going to be, the storyline was kind of more of Obi-Wan, teaching or protecting a young Luke Skywalker on Tatooine. Lucasfilm felt that leaned a little bit too much into what the Mandalorian's doing now with the child. So they actually stopped and had all the scripts rewritten. So I'm not sure now if he's got to be on Tatooine at some point, but maybe, each episode's a flashback. Maybe it's, who knows?
So maybe he goes off planet every once in a while to have little adventures.
Could be. They did that in the Marvel comic series back in the day. So
yeah,
they could do that as well. And finally, the only other news item I have, which is if you get your weekly comic books, and I know at some point you all worked in a bookstore, they may have been delayed this week because there was a break-in at Diamond Distributors UK headquarters.
Wow.
Yeah.
What were they stealing?
Well, so there's among the stolen property, there's like various Hasbro Star Wars like Black Series figures.
Oh.
And I guess like a full-scale Thanos gauntlet. Mm-hmm. And then one thing that they made a point of mentioning, which is this exclusive Funko Pop of Iron Man. So I have to, I'm obliged to ask Jim, where were you the night of October 4th? And what is that Iron Man figure behind you? Yeah, it just sounds like if you're going to break into a facility, this is what you're stealing.
Well, sounds like an inside. You would have to know what was in there.
Not only that, but I think it would be hard to move that stuff because they said that. So especially the Iron Man, like
they're one of a kind, right?
Yeah, and I guess he comes with this I don't know, FX exclusive sticker or something, and the sticker's not on this package, so it would be very easy to. They already put out an APB. It's like, listen, if you come across this stuff, it could be, stolen. Anyways, that's all the news I have.
This goes back to this conversation we've been having week after week, which is like how movie theaters are dying and, nobody seems to care or do anything about it because so many places won't reopen theaters, but they'll reopen restaurants and gyms,
right.
Like things where people, would have their mask off and they're talking and eating, or like a gym where people are sweating and panting and, potentially expelling like huge clouds of coronavirus
blah,
versus a theater where people are sitting quietly and can social distance and wear a mask. One of the heads, I think, of a Korean movie chain was talking about how since they've reopened films there, 31.5 million people have been to the movies, and there have been no cases of coronavirus traced to movie theaters, and there have been no super spreader events traced to people who've been to the movie theater. And Korea is one of these countries that has been really, really diligent about contact tracing. So I think the upshot of this is like moviegoing is actually much safer than a lot of the other activities that people are doing right now.
People don't see it like that though, because I the handful of times where we jumped the border and we went and I get involved in an online discussion with people, they're just they're like, you're nuts. I would never be caught in a movie theater. You'll go to the restaurant and you can't wait till you get your table and whip your mask off.
And you got to think of the populace as well. Jeff, you were talking about that guy when we went to New Mutants that was chomping down next to you throughout the entire movies. I would be much more trustful of the Korea system set in place, of the contact tracing and everything else, which is something I know that we're not doing for theaters that are open.
I think the important point of the quote was that, there's been no events like coronavirus events linked to moviegoing.
Moviegoing.
Zero.
Well,
whereas...
there won't be here either because, as we know, they're all shut down. And I shared with you, my local theater has that little comment directed toward Cuomo, our governor. And then there's one in Manhattan. It looks like probably all the Regals theaters can reopen in 48 states. What's going on in New York? But the problem is that, they're all now closed because there's nothing new to show anyways.
Right.
But the reason why there's nothing to show is because these big markets wouldn't open.
Yeah. I think it's too little too late, to be honest with you. If you're going to be snarky, it would have been 3 months ago.
Yeah. To Christina's point, the theaters would have to open first.
Right.
Before anything else could happen.
And as we mentioned last week, the reason they all the Regals closed in the US and the UK is because they dropped back the James Bond movie.
And Black Widow, which was also supposed to be November. So
and you're gonna see Wonder Woman follow suit.
Right. And a lot of what I've been reading about this, like I saw a thing where Patty Jenkins was saying, if something's not done now, like there may not be theaters next year.
Yeah.
Well, even the Broadway, they backed up. They're not even open until May now. And that's another 6 months of people out of work in Manhattan, actors and.
I mean, Broadway, I understand to an extent because it's live actors, right? And they would be interacting with each other on stage, and obviously they can't wear masks while they're performing. And you have like up to 8 shows a week. That's a lot of exposure. Like you could probably socially distance the audience and have them wear masks, but then the actors are at risk. So I understand Broadway. But in movie going, obviously the film's already done, and they can play it as many times as the day they want, and the actors will not be at risk. So I do think there's not been enough attention paid to the arts overall. Everyone's at home and they're like, we want to binge watch TV and we want new movies and we want books, but nobody cares about the artists that are producing this stuff. Yeah. And no governments seem to want to make investment in making sure that artists can eat in the interim until
and that's musicians as well. Yeah, it's across the board. It's scary. So
I have a suggestion for Governor Cuomo and for everybody else out there.
Are you listening, Cuomo?
I hope so. So the next big release date that's still scheduled is Christmas, correct? Is that when we pushed Wonder Woman to
Wonder
now?
Woman,
Christmas. So why not have New York theaters, other theaters that are closed, shoot for a December reopen date? Because everything's been pushed back, and at least to have distributors have something to shoot for. Maybe start pulling back some of those release dates that are pushed out into the far reaches of 2021. If they have something tangible to latch onto, even if it's tentative, New York can reopen, say, December 15th, and then just take baby steps up until Christmas and then go from there. I'm putting it out there.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
It would be a nice Christmas gift, but.
And speaking of new movies, I've got a couple of more tidbits I've seen on the next Spider-Man, which is looking to be a Spider-Verse type of a movie because Doctor Strange will be involved. And this is how all these different actors and characters from all the
we were talking about Jamie Foxx last week. So
we're talking about Jamie Foxx. Now Vincent D'Onofrio has thrown his hat into the ring. It's not confirmed yet by the studio, but he put it out there that he wants to play Kingpin in this upcoming Spider-Man movie. And this is unconfirmed, but I've seen that the studio has reached out to Tom Hardy to play Eddie Brock in this new Spider-Man.
Interesting. This might be a cluster. Listen, whatever. They did gangbusters with the first two, so I'll give them leeway.
We'll see.
So is that it? We're news out?
We're news out. We are 2 weeks into October. This is our second scary movie episode.
Ooh.
And these are 2 classics directed by Don Coscarelli. As Christina has mentioned, he has written a book called True Indie, which kind of outlines his career and gives you some behind the scenes stories of all the films that he's directed. And I'm about halfway through it right now, up until the mid 80s portion of his career when he was directing the Ronnie James Dio video for The Last in Line, which I remember fondly from watching MTV
song, by the way.
in those days. Amazing stories. And if anybody's interested in Don Coscarelli or his films, please go to your local library or look it up on Amazon, True Indie. It's a very, very entertaining read, and I'm not even finished with it yet. We're concentrating on Mr. Coscarelli today. We're doing 2 of his films. First up, Phantasm, which really put him on the map in terms of the horror genre and filmmaking in general. He's got a very horror-friendly name as well when you see that in the blood red letters after the Phantasm logo.
Second feature is Bubba Ho-Tep. I've watched this movie so many times. I actually saw it on its initial release in theaters. Every time I watch this movie, even though it has a somewhat melancholy undertone, I always am just filled with happiness when I'm done. Which is, I think, one of the interesting things about that film. But I'm so excited to be talking about Bubba Ho-Tep.
To extend that train of thought, this episode is not just any ordinary episode. This, thanks to Christina's devotion to this movie, we are going to be inducting Bubba Ho-Tep into the 5 Bucket Club today.
Yes, we will.
So hold the fanfare. We'll wait till wait to play that until
only
we
once.
get to.
I was waiting for it. I heard it in my head.
Right. But first up, we have Phantasm. Now, this came out 1979. It was 2 years in the making, so I think it was actually filmed in 77. And the editing process took so long because Don Coscarelli did a lot of the work himself.
Yeah, his name's all over this.
His name's all over it. Editing, cinematography. So it was long in the process, but absolutely worth it. He had come out with 2 features previous to this as a teenager. Actually, his first movie was called Story of a Teenager. Terrible title.
He talks about how much he doesn't like that title.
Yes.
Too. Yeah.
Renamed, was it Jim the One and Only, Jim the Greatest? I forget what the second title was of the movie after it was picked up by another distributor. But then he also did Kenny and Company, which is like a coming of age comedy, which I have never seen before. But after reading about it, I so want to track it down. Have you seen it?
Mm-mm.
No, really?
Yeah, it's not like something that I found that's like readily available. So, I mean, it may be now, but Michael Baldwin is in it.
Yeah, from Phantasm.
Phantasm.
So those were the 2 films that he had made previous to Phantasm and didn't get much of an audience at all. Phantasm was kind of his make or break, and he really wanted to do something commercial. And of course, horror movies are always profitable most of the time. So it was a purely monetary decision up front, but the movie is so unique and so out there that you can't say that it was just a cash grab on his part. It is truly one of the pillars of horror cinema, not only from the 70s, but
you're tipping your hand real early there.
Just the way Don Coscarelli talks about the making of this film, which is like really scrappy, and he's kind of like drawing at everybody he knows, like calling in favors. Hey, do you want to come and do this? Hey, do you want to build a set? His mom did all the makeup, all the costuming, gave them advice on like how to decorate the mausoleum. Marble contact paper.
Yeah, contact paper. Yeah, contact paper.
I read the chapters on Phantasm before this viewing, and so when the mausoleum scenes came up, I'm like, that's contact paper.
It looks really good.
It looks
never know.
Very impressive. Yeah.
You'd never know, except when Jody pries open one of those drawer doors, you could hear the wood clatter onto the floor.
The way he, kind of persisted to get the movie made and all that stuff. It reminded me a lot of the stories that Bruce Campbell told in his first biography about them making Evil Dead. And there's a lot of that kind of same thing where it took such a long time and they were trying to problem solve on the fly and they didn't have very much money. And it's amazing, actually when it all is said and done, how overall professional these films look when it's really piecemeal,
Yes. And it's almost kind of don't look at the man behind the curtain when you read this stuff. But to me, it really elevates the movie when you're watching it, that knowing the effort that's gone into it and knowing like little behind the scenes stuff from each one of these scenes that you're watching, having that insider knowledge, I think adds to it rather than detracts from it. But yes, so Phantasm obviously has been around for a long time in our psyches. Do we have any stories or memories from the first time that we became aware of this or saw it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason I chose this movie. We've laid it out here that I'm not a big horror fan, but this, I've seen it numerous times, and it was probably on HBO. at my grandfather's house. Like there's key scenes in this that just are etched in your memory. It really is kind of unique, and there's a lot of like visually there's some stunning stuff going on that you'd never really seen before. So when I went to go back and rewatch this, I adhered to Jim's chasing the dragon theory. I watched it at night with all my lights off, no notes, and I just curled up on the couch and I tried to channel that, 14-year-olds watching this and just being amazed by it. And the funny thing is that 3/4 of this movie, I don't remember at all. There are obviously key scenes with the ball, with the tall man, the little interdimensional Jawas or whatever the hell you want to call them. But by and large, most of this movie, I did not remember.
I think because of the density of the story, there's so much crammed in, so many ideas to process.
Yeah.
That it's very easy to lose some of that. You're just thinking of the visceral stuff. That's what you take with you.
And I think the ending, because it is kind of out of nowhere, as a kid, you're just like you just want more, like you really just started scratching the surface of what's going on. And I understand, I guess I'm going to assume that this was somewhat of a hit since they made 4 sequels.
Yes.
But I have never gone out of my way to seek those sequels out. And now I want to.
Right.
Especially if they expand upon what was going on with this guy, because it leaves more questions. That's all I got to say.
It is probably one of the best examples of like the mic drop ending of a movie. Like, we're done. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, basically. Yeah. Cut the black.
Yeah.
So do we want to get into the actual? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, wait. We got
Yeah. Sorry.
Christina, when was the first time that you saw it?
At a sleepover in the 80s.
Of course.
This is how I saw all the horror movies that I ever saw.
The friend's big sister rented the movies for
probably,
you?
Probably like a different, at a somewhat different house, different older sibling. It's funny too. It came out in 1979, but I was thinking about this recently because I watched so many films for the first time on videotape in the 80s. I keep thinking that movies from the 70s are actually 80s movies.
Right.
Because that's when you first experience them. Because I was asked this question in an interview actually last week that I did for Forbidden Planet. And I said, oh, I love 80s horror movies. And he said, oh, which ones? And then I started running through my head. I'm like, oh, no, wait, that's actually 70. That's 76. Like, that's 79. Like, maybe I actually don't like 80s horror movies. Maybe I really like 70s horror movies. Because I feel like that VHS experience is so like...
That's what made 70s movies, 80s movies, is because they were all mixed together. Once the video boom happened in the early 80s, that's when they became available again.
But it's so foundational if you grew up in that era, and I just want to say I have the remastered Blu-ray of this. And
I that's what I watched as well.
On Shudder, they've got the Bad Robot remaster.
And if you've only ever watched this film as a kid on VHS, it is a revelation to see it remastered. It looks so good.
It was impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even before the remaster, I remember being really taken with that final scene when they go through the door and the bright white floodlights of that room. The portal room, the lighting is just really, it's top notch. It doesn't give you the impression that you're watching a movie that's on a shoestring budget. They do a lot with what they have.
Yeah, I think both these movies do a lot with very little, to be honest with you. And I think that's out of necessity.
But I remember the first time that I saw it, I'm taking a page from Christina's book. It was at a sleepover, but it was just me and my buddy, Kevin. And we rented a bunch of horror movies that night. And this is the only one I remember. And it blew my mind. And the reason I liked it so much, and that makes it so bizarre, not the story, not even talking about the dwarves or the story or anything like that, is that the main protagonist is like a 13-year-old kid.
Yeah.
In an R-rated, pretty intense horror movie. And this is not something that's marketed to kids. So seeing the hero is a kid your age, because I saw it probably in 83. I was maybe not yet in high school. It was an 8th grade sleepover maybe. Spending like the afternoon looking at his famous monsters magazines and then going into the horror movies. That's what stuck stuck out to me is that the hero was a kid. So it was really something that I could get behind and related to, especially the aspect, and you see this in a lot of movies, but of him, the boy who cried wolf aspect. No, in the beginning, nobody believes him what he's seeing.
And since we're talking about first experiences, so my son watched this for the first time for this viewing. We've sort of been spacing out, like, you know, when he's watching kind of iconic horror movies. So he's 14 now. It's like, okay, he can watch this. He was blown away from the start. And it's always so gratifying to me when he likes something like this, because I think the pacing it's very deliberate. It's not like fast paced. It's not, like fast cuts. And I think that a lot of younger viewers be like, oh, this is boring, but he was like, oh, it's so weird. And he loved the score.
Yeah. It's very bizarre. It's very,
he's trying to look it up. He's trying to look it up on Apple Music so he could listen to it afterwards. And again, that ending, like, it just makes you ask so many questions. And he was just speculating, about what the ending might mean and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's always really nice as a parent when you can like watch something like this with your kid and they're into it.
Yes. I would never show this to my son at this point.
Because he's only 10, right?
There's a critical, even though it's only a few years between our sons.
No, not yet.
It's critical. Those, this time period.
Yeah, although I will add, I mean, he was predisposed to like this because I brought him. So I met Don Coscarelli 2 years ago, in 2018, and my son was 12. And the film was Bubba Ho-Tep. He was totally fine with that film. It's not super, super scary.
No, or gory, right?
Yeah. But he was so impressed with Don Coscarelli. And he loved the Q&A. Like, he was the first one down to ask him a question. Like, he ran to the mic after the film was over.
What's Elvis really like?
He actually asked him what his favorite movie was growing up.
Oh, good question.
Don Coscarelli
what did he say?
Said Frankenstein and like other Universal
Frankenstein
horror movies. My son was so impressed with Don Coscarelli, and he's such a nice man. I really mean that. Like, you can just tell he's sort of fundamentally kind and so generous to his fans. And when I met him, both of us had been at New York Comic-Con, where I met Jeff Chandler.
You met Jeff Chandler?
Yeah.
Wow.
Both of us had been at New York Comic-Con the day before, promoting our respective books, on panels and doing signings. So when I was having my book signed by him, we were talking about the weirdness of trying to talk to fans while you're signing their book. It's very difficult not to write what you're
saying, what you're talking about
in the book. But yeah, my son was so impressed when we met Don Coscarelli, and I think that really predisposed him to like Phantasm because he liked the person so much.
Yeah, you get a little flavor of his personality on that remastered disc. Is that public access interview he does with him and Angus Scrim?
Yeah, and his personality obviously comes through in the book as well that he wrote. Cool. But let's get into Phantasm.
Let's get into it.
It opens with poor Tommy.
Let's talk about that opening scene because you physically it doesn't quite work, but okay. Anyway,
well, he is seduced by a very hot old man.
This I don't get at all. What? So he transforms into a woman, seduces a man in a bar, takes him out, they engage in sex in the graveyard, and then he kills him. But then he goes through the whole process of letting the guy now go to the funeral parlor, and only after the burial does he take the body. Why not just cut out that whole, just take the body after you kill it? Like, does he need that much money to like control his?
We're already getting into it now. This
I want to know because it didn't make any sense to me. Once
you're not supposed to ask. This is like the dreamlike quality of this. Nothing is supposed to make sense in this.
No,
right from the get-go.
I think if you just look at it from a logical standpoint, if a lot of people go missing, that spawns an investigation, right? But then if you have a dead body, and apparently whatever happened, it looks like the guy committed suicide, right? Because they say
scissors through the chest. Oh, Tommy killed himself. It's like, come on. And does he enjoy being a woman?
I know. I think he does a little too much because the sex is completed before he actually kills him.
Right. Yeah. It's like, listen, if I'm going to do this, I'm going all in.
So we know up front that our tall man, our bad guy, is a shapeshifter. That's the first thing that we know about him. Not only is he the mortician, but he is also some kind of a shapeshifter.
So that's question number one right there. Yeah.
The main plot is the two brothers, Mike and Jody. Their parents have died. So their parents are among these mystery deaths that have been happening in this Oregon town and left them orphans. So Jody is the older brother that is now forced to parent his younger brother, played by Michael Baldwin, who is probably 13 in this movie, but can drive cars, can drive motorcycles, no problem. And so Mike is terrified that Jody is going to leave him. So the movie opens with Mike kind of shadowing Jody wherever he goes to make sure that he doesn't leave.
Right, and he follows him to Tommy's funeral.
Yeah. And speaking of talking about things that we don't think kids can handle, they don't think that Mike can handle this funeral. So he's not there, but Mike is spying on the funeral from afar.
Yeah.
They don't think he can handle it because they said like he had like a nervous breakdown at their parents' funeral.
Right.
So he just doesn't think that he's emotionally up to it. The one interesting thing, like I think Jody is sort of weirdly unsympathetic towards the way Michael follows him. Like,
very much so.
Of course he follows you.
Yeah,
he lost his parents.
He's only father figure. Yeah, this kid was very aloof about his little brother.
But this is a good point. But Jody is young himself, so he's thrust into this parental role, which he didn't want. Right. And maybe he always was annoyed by his little brother before.
Now he's now he's stuck with him. Yeah.
So, but we get the first glimpse of the dwarf creatures when Mike is kind of sneaking through the cemetery to watch the proceedings. He turns around and sees little, and this is one of the biggest memories I have of my first viewing, were these sequences with you just see the robed figures just hide themselves behind the gravestones. Yeah. And you so much want to hear that sound effect from the Jawas. But, I should point out that this was done, these scenes were filmed before Star Wars, so this is not a Jawa ripoff of these dwarves. But visually, it's a great scene because he thinks that he's seeing things. He's not quite sure. These, little figures hiding behind the gravestones. And then he spies on the funeral and stays there after the funeral's done. And this is when he sees the tall man by himself manhandle the coffin and throw it back into the hearse. Mike, from the get-go, knows that something is not right in Kansas here. And he's trying to tell people just from this point on that, okay, I saw the tall man lift up this coffin by himself. There's something wrong here, and nobody believes him at this point.
And that's when we're first introduced to the tall, other than the little flash when you realize that he was the woman, is when Jody goes to the mausoleum that we spoke about earlier, and he sees his parents' headsetters. I don't know what they call them in the mausoleum, and then all of a sudden the tall man just slaps him on the shoulder and he goes, "The funeral's about to begin, sir." And the camera angle, this guy's tall to begin with, and I think they put him in platform shoes to make him even taller. And an
ill-fitting suit that was a little bit too small for him.
And the minute you hear that, you're like, "Oh, this guy's creepy."
He's got a great voice.
But it's great because when you watch those interviews, he's like the nicest guy. He's like I love doing this stuff,
And Angus Grimm itself, that could be like a Michael Myers name, or Jason Voorhees. Angus
Don't let Grimm get you.
Well,
which is obviously it's not his real name. Yeah, it's not his real name.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure when he adopted that, if it was for Phantasm or if it was before, but his real name is Rory Guy. Decidedly less scary than Angus Grimm.
Rory Scrim.
So we also get introduced to the character of Reggie, played by Reggie Bannister, real life friend to Don Coscarelli, and has appeared in all of his films except for the Beastmaster.
Oh, you couldn't get that Scarlet in there?
I guess not. I guess not.
Yes.
You couldn't work in an acoustic guitar number into Beastmaster, unfortunately. At this point, when you're watching a Don Coscarelli movie, because you catch him in Bubba Ho-Tep as well, it's like a reaffirming presence, you know, like, oh, there's Reggie, you know, that's all is right with the world.
It's
Reggie
like
is
Sean
here.
Gunn and any James Gunn.
Or like Ted Raimi.
Ted Raimi, or even Clint Howard.
So the movie doesn't get far with the whole the boy who cried werewolf bit. Until like pretty soon into the movie, Jody actually believes him because of the whole finger thing. Now, I don't want to go through point by point of the movie if we just want to pick up highlights, but there is one bizarre scene. Now, I did read that the original cut of Phantasm was close to 3 hours long.
Oh.
Yeah.
And that at test screenings, the audience really balked and said it was boring, and Coscarelli realized he needed to really streamline it. So there was a lot of exposition of stuff that in the final cut is not explained. So I don't know, how much he lost in terms of plot and explanation, but it does seem that characters come and go without much, like the whole scene at the fortune tellers in the beginning. You have a feeling that character should have played bigger,
been brought back in or something. I don't remember. I didn't remember that at all.
I mean, the granddaughter goes to the graveyard and she goes into the mausoleum and opens the door, right? And she screams. And that's the end of that.
But Reggie, a little bit later, when all three of them storm the mortuary, he says, I found some girls. I let them go.
Right.
So
and it's like, what?
Maybe that girl was one of the girls that he found.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's a kind of a giveaway of the small budget. Like a lot of the action takes place off screen and you're just kind of told what.
Right. Yeah, we killed the bad guy. Let's go.
Well, I mean, film costs money.
Yeah, sure.
That's the thing. Like, you have to remember, it's not like they had, digital and they had an endless amount of opportunities to film stuff. They had to.
I'm surprised that they never came out with the extended director's cut. If there's that much that's still on the floor, unless it doesn't really add anything to it. I mean, maybe that's why he cut it, but maybe that's because this has such a cult status following at this point that would be something people would eat
I
up.
think that once he's cut it and then you've got questions, I think that adding scenes back in that explain too much, I think would take away from the overall.
Maybe answer all that stuff in the sequel.
It's kind of like the Lost syndrome. Like at the end, some people thought that was too much explanation. Like mystery is good.
Leave them guessing.
One of the most iconic things about Phantasm is the chrome ball.
Yeah.
Which is another kind of got a Star Wars connection because of the whole training sequence on the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah, yeah.
And also it makes me think of the little eye globe from Big Trouble in Little China. That little guy and that's saying something because I watched Phantasm on Shudder on the Joe Bob Briggs show. So he does a lot of commentary interspersed with the movie. And he gave his interpretation of the ball that he thinks that it's the tall man's perception. Mm-hmm. And very much like Lopan in Big Trouble in Little China.
Right, yeah.
He threw that little, that little globe guy that Joe Bob thinks that it's the same with the sphere and the tall man, that it's like an extension of his eye, he sees what the silver ball sees. And that kind of like is policing.
You do get that kind of first person view of the ball.
Yeah, but that actually, before I saw Phantasm, I was aware of the silver sphere. I think everybody was,
I think we were, yeah. Though that's one of the most iconic.
Specifically because of an old show that used to be on ABC in the New York area, Channel 7. It was called That's Hollywood, and it was a half-an-hour show, and it would run Monday through Friday, and it was probably on like at 5:30. And they would run like clips and it was different themed episodes. And whenever they would have a horror episode, they would show that scene with the silver sphere from Phantasm. And it would cut right before the drilling part. So you wouldn't see
I think you in like Fangoria or Famous Monsters or some of those other magazines, they did show like that blood gushing out.
Right. But it was such an original idea. The whole thing is original. But that Silver Sphere is just so linked to Phantasm with the marketing and everything else. And it is a very effective.
Yeah, it's a unique little item there. That's
right.
Cool. And again, never explained.
Well, that's one of the interesting things about like the tall man in general is he sort of appears on screen fully formed. You know, there's no explanation. There's no Michael Myers. This was a guy in an asylum who committed a murder when he was a kid or blah blah. This is just the villain's just there. He just is there, and the fact that he's menacing and he has this weird device that can kill you is enough. You know, even to an extent, the explanation that you get at the end about why, you know, he's making people, pickling them in these vats and turning them into little, you know, dwarves.
It looked to me like he was going to have a heck of a kegger from that
room. Even that explanation, you almost don't want it, because you almost want him to just be this mythical kind of supernatural figure. You know, there's no explanation, he just is.
And it just gets weirder because when Mike cuts his finger off, and now he has to prove it, he's like, it's like yellow mustard coming out.
Before that happens with the Silver Sphere, Mike is attacked by this second man in the mausoleum. And he ends up ducking after he bites the guy's arm, and the Silver Sphere ends up embedding itself into this guy's forehead. And and I'm wondering during this viewing, who the heck is this guy?
Right? Yeah. He's like,
what significance does he have? And then in
other than to die,
reading, he's called the Caretaker. So he is in simpatico with the tall man somehow, but he's dispatched pretty easily, where the tall man seems to be immortal. So I don't know if he's his familiar, if he's his human, you know, like is James Mason in Salem's Lot, or what. But yeah, he's never really explained either. But it's interesting to note that Don Coscarelli says that the Silver Sphere came to him in a dream. And it's very fitting because in the end, after all these edits and after all these questions, the movie just becomes more dreamlike.
Yeah.
And at the end, you're torn with, is what you've seen supposed to be real, or is it not?
Yeah, because you were told up front that, you know, Michael's already had a breakdown. So is he just imagining all this?
So the whole Silver Sphere scene, it comes from Michael breaking into the mausoleum because nobody believes him and he wants to get proof somehow that what he says is true.
I know. I'll just chop his finger off.
Yep. So that's what happens. So as Jeff said, the tall man is chasing him and he slams the door on his hand and chops his fingers off and takes one because they're still moving on the floor. The fingers that have been severed. Takes one and then gets out of there.
That's the one scene where my son was like screaming at the television in outrage. Don't take the finger, take the knife. Right? Because he leaves the knife on the floor and he tucks the finger in the pocket of his jacket. It's like that jacket's going to have to be burned.
Yeah.
Yes. But this is how he gets Jody to believe him, is the finger. And as Jeff said, this in one of the more bizarre turns of the movie, the finger turns into like a demon giant fly and tries to attack Mike. And then
that scene where it crawls through his hair, like that was one of those moments that I remember going, this is a messed up flick. And it's not, like you said, there's not a lot of jump scares. It's not like gory, but it's bizarre. It's like he just took all these ideas and threw them on a wall. And you're left to figure out, what the hell am I even watching here?
And then Reggie saunters in the middle of this struggle with the giant fly. So they're all trying to get it into the garbage disposal. And finally, they kill it. But now they believe Mike. And now they're all in on investigating the tall man. And speaking of, you know, he's going to have to wash that jacket. At one point, they find Tommy as a dwarf. That when the hearse is chasing them at one point, and they think that nobody's driving it. It's just that the dwarf didn't put his phone book on the driver's seat. They just can't see him. And so then the hearse crashes, and then they look and see, and then it's Tommy in the robes that has been driving the hearse, and they put him and Reggie is an ice cream man.
Yeah, it's a good thing that ice cream truck blew up, because I don't think I would ever eat ice cream out of it.
No, because he says, is this guy going to leak all over my ice cream? I don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
And they put him in the ice cream truck. So from this point on, it just goes, it devolves further and further into dreamland. Jumping ahead a little bit, there's a scene where Mike is left in the care of these two teenage girls that may or may not, one of them may be Jodie's girlfriend. You don't know who these girls are, really. They run an antique shop. And Mike is looking through old pictures as he's stuck.
That's another scene, yeah.
And he sees like an old picture of the tall man on horse and carriage in front of the mausoleum. So the idea that he is immortal is propagated by this scene.
But then he turns and he looks at Mike, and you're like, all right, is that just happened, or is this Mike just being a freak now?
Then Mike insists that he goes home, and this is one of the more disturbing scenes. I don't know why. One of the more disturbing scenes for me is when they get in their Volkswagen Beetle and they're taking him home, and they see the ice cream truck, which is off the road, and the back door is open, and the dwarf has escaped or he's been taken. So as they're there investigating the ice cream, these dwarves just swarm on the Volkswagen. It drives away, and Mike breaks out the back windshield, and the dwarves get away with the girls to do who knows what with. And that was one of the more disturbing things, the girls screaming as the dwarves are struggling with them, and they're taken away into the night, and you never see them again. And again, you assume that it's those girls that Reggie is talking about,
right?
That escape off camera. It's difficult to even talk about, because now as I'm thinking about the events that have transpired in this movie, I'm like, okay, did this happen first or did this happen first? Because it's all almost non-linear and hazy which is, I think, what it should be. I think maybe that is the desired effect of watching this.
So ultimately, it feels the way a dream feels, where when you're dreaming, like you could be in a scene of something happening and then suddenly you just jump to something else, and there's no connective tissue between the two things that have happened in your brain, right? So I think that lends to like this really eerie atmosphere, and the movie just has this way of getting under your skin where you're kind of just sort of feel uneasy.
So now we have the team of Mike, Jodie, and Reggie, who are all in on exposing the tall man. Their worry is, now that they know that Tommy is a dwarf, well, what happened to their mom and dad? Have they suffered the same fate? And Jodie wants to get in there and see for himself what has happened. And so a little bit later in the movie, they break into the mausoleum. And this is the scene where we're talking about the contact paper, and Jodie pries the wooden panel off of the marble, quote unquote. Wall. Jodie never ends up actually looking into the coffin. Mike does, and sees that the coffin's empty. So their fears have been confirmed, that their parents are also these dwarves, which is also a horrifying idea. They find the door, which we see the girl with the flowers, the granddaughter of the fortune teller, has walked into this room earlier in the movie. But you don't see what's in the room. Now we do. Now the team of Mike, Jodie, Reggie get into the room, and this is where they have all the kegs, which are containers of the dwarves. And they've got what looks like Reggie's tuning fork, and that comes in a little bit later. Yeah. Two prongs, two little pillars sticking up out of the floor. Mike puts his hand through and sees that it's an interdimensional kind of a door.
Portal, yeah.
He falls into it, and that's one of you realize, if you freeze frame one of those shots, that's the image from the poster of Mike floating in the air above the silver sphere, is him falling into this interdimensional doorway. And he sees a vision of this long line of dwarves, empty keg containers, and what looks like a Martian type landscape.
The red. Yeah.
And so Jodie had grabbed him, and as Mike is looking at this, Jodie is holding him and pulls him back through the doorway. And then Mike has an epiphany, and he kind of explains what he just saw. Don't you see? It makes perfect sense. No, they're slaves and they're dwarves because of the gravity. It's like,
Good old Mike. He figured it out. Nailed it.
Again, but Joe Bob says that he thinks that he knows this, not because he's making a wild guess, is that he has some kind of connection psychically to the tall man, and that's how he blurts out this information, is that that he's seeing it through the tall man's eyes, and the proof of that is that he saw the picture moving and that type of thing. I know it's a leap, but that's per Joe Bob, so that's an interpretation. So now we kind of know what's going on thanks to Mike, in the barest of terms that, okay, these dwarves are slaves. The tall man is an alien, and he is the keeper of this portal to his other planet. And he's making these dwarves out of dead bodies to be slaves on the original planet. And he's just kind of like the slave wholesaler, if you will. Maybe he's making money off of this or what have you. But he's taking the residents of this Oregon town and killing them when he becomes short on dwarf bodies.
Coscarelli, I have to ask, what the hell were you smoking? It's just so out. But I think that was part of the allure as a kid, was it was just so bizarre. It's just so, like, there's so many weird things going on here that don't make any sense. And as a kid, I was like, I don't even know what I just watched, but I want to watch it again.
You couldn't even classify this as a horror movie.
No, correct. And that's why I probably did watch it more than once.
Yeah,
it defies description.
And I read somewhere that the American Film Institute at one point classified this as a comedy and not horror or sci-fi.
It's a budding romance. That's interesting. I will say that I had, because of my memories, I had high expectations, and it fell way short.
This particular screening? Really?
Yeah. I don't know what I was expecting. I do remember, like I said, there's key moments that just are etched in your head, but I tried chasing the dragon, and I did not catch him.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
But listen, I still enjoyed it. I was happy to watch it again.
Yeah,
for sure. And again, we talk about the remastered, and it looks, I watched it on HBO. I didn't watch it on VHS, but still, you're talking a low end television, that back in the day off cable, that probably wasn't any higher than pure static. It was
clarity of the remaster really helps with some of those low light scenes, especially there's a lot of scenes in this film that take place in the dark, like in the cemetery, and there's you can actually see more of the effect of the lighting that they were going for with the remaster, which is nice.
And so I'm assuming that it was because you said that we saw the Bad Robot logo comes up, so it was Abrams, I guess, was a fan of this.
Yes.
And so he took it upon himself.
There's a chapter in the book where Coscarelli talked about Abrams approaching him and saying that they had this facility, and they sort of worked on it piecemeal over like a year or so, saying, okay, we have a few hours, like come over and we'll like work on a segment of the movie. And then they got done, and Abrams like, okay, let's do the sound. And Coscarelli was like, man, like you've already done like this beautiful visual remaster. I don't want to take up more of your time. And Abrams was like, if we want, the visuals are great, we want the sound to be great too. So then they redid the sound mix too. So like, it's really, I think, such a nice job. It's really restoring the movie.
You could tell it's a labor of love on Abrams' part. He named Captain Phasma based on Phantasm.
That's true. And she's got the silver stormtrooper outfit,
right?
Whatever you want to call them.
So let's get into the end. Our interpretations on the very end. Not even the dwarf slave aspect.
Right.
So, there's more.
Reggie is stabbed and apparently killed by the tall man. Actually, the lady in lavender, and then who in extension is the tall man. Jody and Mike escape. Reggie is killed. And then suddenly we get like a coda where Jody has been killed in a car accident, which you don't see.
You don't see it, yeah.
You see
it's like Mike's waking up from a dream.
Well, and first, Jody and Mike bury the tall man in this mine shaft.
The hole in the mine shaft.
Yeah.
Right. And you get this weird coda where it seems like Mike is waking up from a nightmare right after that. And he's talking to Reggie, and he's like, I know he's going to get out of that mine shaft. Right. I know he's going to get out.
What are you talking about? You have a nightmare again.
Yeah.
And so you're thinking, is the whole thing I just witnessed a dream? And so then Mike goes back up into his room because Reggie says, let's go on a road trip. And then Mike sees the tall man in his mirror. And then the drop the mic jump scare, the tall man grabs him, pulls him through the mirror, and then cut to credits.
Cut to black.
So I think that end is the dream. And the whole what you've seen has actually happened. And Mike is having a dream at the end. with where Reggie is alive. And again, I'm not bringing anything from the sequels into it because I haven't seen those in years, so I don't know what the actual explanation is. But my interpretation was that the end was a dream.
Okay. I don't really have anything to add to that.
I mean, I think I like these kinds of endings where you can speculate.
Yes, you love this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I would feel cheated if like the whole movie was a dream. Like you
right, especially Jodie dying and you not even being privy to
right, and right, correct. It's like, no, none of that happened. Your brother died. Now you're all alone.
Yeah.
And now you just have this nightmare. Yeah. This guy's going to adopt you though. This tall guy's going to come. Yeah, but it does make you want to go watch those sequels. Because I think Reggie's in every one of them. And I know they brought back Mike. I don't know.
I think Jodie from the photos I saw in the Don Coscarelli's book, Jodie is in at least one of the sequels.
Right.
So
and obviously Scrim's in all of them as well.
Right.
As the tall man.
Is he? Is he in all of them? I don't know. We'll find out. I guess if we watch the sequels.
We have to watch them now.
Yeah, I can't read those chapters now. Now I'm
spoiler alert.
So yeah, I loved it on this viewing, and Chasing the Dragon, it did bring me right back, especially the visual of all those dwarves in line at the end. I remembered that distinctly from when I was a kid in 1983 watching this, and it brought that feeling flooding back once that scene came up. I really liked it this time.
I wish that I was able to capture my initial feelings for this a little bit more. It didn't quite live up to what I wanted it to be. I was still happy to watch it again, but
like I said, it was so nice to watch it not in like grainy VHS.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's just such a unique film. While again, it's almost like he really wanted to make another coming of age movie with horror elements in it. And when you read about it, he talks about all the scenes that were cut. A lot of them were like family moments between Michael and Jodie and things like that got cut out. Like there was a Thanksgiving dinner scene, I guess, and a bunch of other stuff. I think that would have made it a really different movie. But as it is, yeah, it's just something like that is really unique. It sort of stands by itself. It doesn't have a lot of films trying to like copy it. You know?
How could you? Right?
How could you?
How could you? How could you even attempt to be like, all right, that one was a hit, so let's make one. It is a unique animal.
Yeah, and it was a hit because Jeff, you had asked, you said you didn't know whether it did well.
I was assuming it was, in the sense that they made 4 more movies.
The end budget was $300,000. It made $12 million that year, 1979. And as a matter of fact, Newsweek called 79 the scary summer of 1979 because at one point Alien was the #1 movie and Phantasm was the #2 movie. That was also the year that Dawn of the Dead went into full distribution as well. So there was a lot of classic horror out in theaters at that time during that summer. What a time to be alive, right?
What a time to be a kid that you can't go to the theater to watch this stuff.
I would have loved to have seen Tim Conway revealed when one of those dwarves go down.
Dwarfs.
Dwarf on golf.
Dwarf.
Something, yeah.
You're dating yourself with that reference.
Yeah, I know. Like dwarf on golf.
My grandfather had every one of those VHS tapes, by the way.
I think I would give it 4 1/4. I would say 4 1/4 buckets.
That
for
is
me.
freaking high for you.
Yeah. I hesitate, Jeff. What are you gonna deem it worthy of?
I'll give it 3 for the entertainment value and for the memories, because those scenes the scenes that I do remember do hold together, but the whole movie itself is just such a weird. I want to watch the other ones, and then maybe I'll elevate my my buckets, and that's not super low. I didn't go 2 or anything. I still gave it 3.
I'm gonna say it's like a solid 4 because I think it's just so unique in the pantheon of horror films, and also because I like Bubba Ho-Tep so much. And it's sort of interesting where you can see a filmmaker very early in his career and then later in his career, you know, like these two films are separated by what, like 23 years.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see where he's polished his technique, obviously, which you want after, you know, so long in the business, but also you can sort of see the elements, the way he likes to film, I think is still present in
and there's
Bubba
a
Ho-Tep.
couple like, you know, you can't say that the flying scarab is nothing but the sphere. You know, you can equate that to.
Well, the scarab scene was written for a specific reason, but
okay, well,
yeah, we'll get into that.
We'll get into it. Let's go to the concession stand because I'm hungry.
Before we go, I just want to point out that Phantasm was nominated for a Saturn Award for Best Horror Movie in 1980, lost to Frank Langella's Dracula, which I have never seen and have no desire to see.
Frank Langella's. Well, okay.
You don't remember that when it came out in 79?
Yeah,
Again, you know, talking about the scary summer of 79, there was a lot of horror movies out that year. And that was marketed quite a bit, that version of Dracula.
I do remember it. I've never seen it.
But there you have it. So yes, let's go to the concession stand and we'll be back with Bubba Ho-Tep.
Creepy crawlers, creepy crawlers, creepy crawlers.
Now, you can make all kinds of lovely things like these with Mattel's wonderful Thing Maker. It makes creepy crawlers, spiders, lizards, snakes, dragonflies. Make them yourself with this nice plastic goop. Choose a mold, pour in the goop, heat it, and presto changeo, you've got bugs. Squiggly, squirty bugs. They feel so soft and natural. You get 4 different colors of goop and special pins. Make charming lizard pins or spider rings. You can collect them or spread them around. After all, they're fun for the entire family. Get Mattel's new Thing Maker with creepy crawlers. You can tell it's Mattel. It's swell.
Okay, we're back. And Christina, you had said before that you had gone to a screening.
Yeah.
Of Bubba Ho-Tep. Now, have you met Don Coscarelli on a separate occasion from that? Is that correct?
So, well, it's sort of interesting because I've seen the film twice in the theater, and the first time I saw it was with the star, Bruce Campbell, and that was in 2002, because they did not have a major distributor for the film, so they literally were road showing the film.
That's how I saw it as well.
At Landmark Cinemas and at a few other independent cinemas around the country because they had no distribution deal. And the chapter in the book that Don writes about, like trying to get distribution for this film is absolutely heartbreaking, where like they, you know, he's going to film festivals and he's getting this great response from the audiences and the executives are just not picking it up. And he said, even going back to like when they were trying to get funding, people were saying that the film was the story was unfundable, you know, because the concept was so weird.
But again, this is another movie that is just it's hard to categorize. I mean, yeah, it is much more comedic, but yeah, it's a weird animal.
But then when I met Don Coscarelli, it was at a screening again of Bubba Ho-Tep at Music Box. Of course, the Music Box.
Of course.
The greatest independent theater in Chicago.
Your check is in the mail.
Oh, you beat me to it. Was Janelle Monae there?
Janelle Monae was not there.
Oh, okay.
Janelle Monae was not going to come up in this conversation, but you brought her up, Jeff. So and Don was touring to promote his book. So I brought, you know, I got the copy of True Indie and he signed the book there, and then we watched the movie and then there was a Q&A. So it was kind of cool that both times I saw the film in the theater, you know, there's somebody involved in the production, like who talked about the process of the film afterwards. And but in the interim, you know, I had bought the DVD when it first initially came out, and then a few years ago, a Scream Factory Blu-ray came out, and I have that now, and which has a ton of special features on it. And I just love this movie with my whole heart. I don't know what it is exactly about it that appeals to me so much, But they're like I said, sort of despite the slightly melancholy tone of the film, I always just have this feeling of extreme happiness when I'm done watching this movie.
Yes, at its most basic, the monster, Bubba Ho-Tep, is feeding off of the denizens of an old age home because they can't get away like a young person would be able to.
Right.
Sounds so dark and upsetting, but it's not. It's the opposite when you're watching it. It's a very uplifting experience.
You know what makes it though is the narration on this. Is Elvis's internal monologue. I think just elevates this.
It's so interesting because, like, as a general rule in filmmaking, voiceovers are like a no-no, right? They generally are like, you want to try to get away. It's a visual medium and voiceover is narration. But the voiceover really, really works in this. And, and part of it is bringing in, because it's based on Joe Lansdale's short story. And part of that is that it brings in Joe Lansdale's language, which is so key, I think, to understanding the character of Elvis / Sebastian Haff.
Yeah.
I was not able to see this in the theater, unfortunately. I did see it on DVD, I think soon after it was released by MGM. It wasn't a bare bones disc, but it didn't have quite as many features as
the
Shout
DVD
Factory.
I got from my library had like 3 deleted scenes and the audio commentary, which I did not get a chance to watch.
But of course, going into this, Bruce Campbell is a known commodity. So he is probably, when I first saw this, the biggest selling point of the movie. Like, I have to see this. It's the new Bruce Campbell, right? And that's how I was thinking of it. It didn't even occur to me that this was the same guy that did Phantasm until I saw the name watching the movie.
And of course, Bruce Campbell is in it. Do you know the story of how Bruce Campbell ended up in this movie?
Not yet. No, but tell us. I'm okay with this spoiler.
Yeah, well, Don Coscarelli told this story at the Q&A as well. And he does a little bit of a Sam Raimi voice when he's telling it. But they were on the phone and they were talking about something else. And Don brought up this thing where he had optioned Joe Lansdale's story and he was going to make this movie and he wanted to cast somebody as Elvis. And Sam Raimi says, you should get Bruce Campbell. He's a great actor. And the way he says it, you can almost hear Sam saying it if you've ever seen an interview with Sam Raimi. And Don Coscarelli was like, oh, sure, okay. And then Sam Raimi basically hung up with Don Coscarelli, called Bruce Campbell, said, call Don. And 10 minutes later, he got a phone call from Bruce saying, I hear you're making a movie with Elvis.
Oh, my gosh.
And that's how Bruce Campbell ended up in the movie. But it's just kind of a cool thing. But yeah, I think that the fact that Bruce had so many fans from Evil Dead and the fact that Don Coscarelli had so many fans from Phantasm really lent, to like the sort of initial surge of people who went to see the movie.
It's akin to Stephen King and George Romero making Creepshow. You've got those 2 horror marquee names.
Yeah, and then one of the first questions Bruce asked though was, are you gonna show the penis?
Right.
And Don was like, no, I won't show it. And then he's like, okay, I'm in. Because it's true, you don't need to see it.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
The description is
correct.
Is perfect.
Yes. Yeah, I think it would have done it a disservice if you actually showed it.
But it is such a natural performance. Like Bruce should always play Elvis. Like, he's born to play Elvis. It's perfect. I can't think of any better casting, Kurt Russell included.
Well, I think what it is too, and Bruce talked a little bit about this in the interview I saw, is because Elvis never got to that age, you're not really comparing the performance to the real thing. So he's sort of keeping elements of Elvis's persona and his mannerisms, but he also has an opportunity to create a character for himself. Yeah. And he said, we tried to treat him with dignity. And they do. I mean, they're not mocking Elvis.
No, not at all.
I mean, the film is really, in a lot of ways, it's about the indignity of aging, of being helpless, of being infantilized when you're a grown adult.
Yeah, I mean, the first half an hour, 40 minutes of this movie, he's in bed.
His roommate dies, and that scene, and the daughter comes, and it realized she just put him away in this home, forgot about him.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why the mummy is coming after these people, is because nobody cares.
Right, because they're just forgotten people. And he takes, the daughter tries to throw away her father's purple heart.
Yeah, which is just...
Elvis asks for it. Can I have the purple heart? And he sort of starts collecting these, little elements of the other people in the home that, become these kind of talismans for him.
Yeah. Unlike the old lady that's just stealing crap.
But she's clearly, this is the thing, like, when she steals the glasses, right, from the woman who's in the iron lung.
And that poor lady, she's like, please.
I know, yeah.
Yeah. And she takes the chocolates, right, that are meant for somebody else, and then she gets attacked in her room. But, the scene, she falls out of bed. This is a nursing home. Why aren't there nurses running when they hear the thump, right? Like, why isn't anyone monitoring these people? And this is really, you have this feeling that this is like this dead end, like place where people like put their relatives because they just don't want to think about them anymore. And nobody cares what happens to them. So many elements go into creating the pacing, the overall pacing of the film, right? It's very slow and deliberate, a lot like the residents themselves. And I also want to mention before we go any further that Brian Tyler's score for this film is one of the best scores for any movie ever. I actually listen to this score all the time. I think it's amazing. And it lends so much, I think, to the feeling overall, and lends a lot to like that kind of melancholy feeling that you get from Elvis, especially, why didn't fame hold off old age and death? Like I said, there's this very melancholy undertone to the film, but I think in the end it feels sort of joyous because Elvis and JFK, played by Ossie Davis.
Yeah, we haven't even mentioned that JFK is the other major character in this film.
They sort of get their dignity back, by taking some agency, and like trying to solve this problem. And Ossie Davis, I think he's just one of the most likable actors ever. He just has this wonderful, warm quality. He delivers these absolutely hilarious lines, completely straight face. And Bruce Campbell had asked him, like, why are you in this movie? Like, don't you do classy movies? Don Coscarelli at the Q&A told the story of how he had wanted Ossie in the movie. So he actually went to a book signing, for Ossie was signing his memoirs, and Ruby Dee was there. He was going to ask him about it at the signing, but he said he got too nervous. So he just like went up with his book and handed him the book and had him sign it, and then left quietly and never said anything.
Oh.
And he sent the script to Ossie's agent, and Ossie's agent was like, I don't think this is the kind of thing my client should do. And it ended up being Mick Garris, who was a friend of Don Coscarelli's and who had directed Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee in The Stand. Mick Garris got in touch with them and said, Don's a really good guy and you should give him a chance. And Ossie read the script, and his grandkids liked it, I guess, and said he should do it, and he liked it. So yeah, he came on board. And I think it's such a gift that he's in this movie, because he's incredible.
And he steals every scene that he's in.
He's definitely got some of the better lines.
I have to apologize to Bruce, but he steals it from you every time you share the screen.
Want a chocolate ding dong?
You got ding dongs, man? You got ding dong?
Well, not my ding dong. Well, I guess it would be chocolate since they colored me. Oh man.
And we've mentioned the word dignity quite a bit, and I just want to key off what Christina was saying, how they portray Elvis with dignity. In the beginning, you're not quite sure if he's on the level or not.
Yeah.
When you're listening to the voiceover, okay, is this Elvis or is he crazy? But then you see the flashbacks of him switching places with this impersonator. And so you realize that the real Elvis that you're now viewing in this home never drugged himself into oblivion, that he was always in control of his capacities. And it was this impersonator that railroaded his persona and ended up dead. So yeah, it kind of gives Elvis back his dignity, as we were saying before. Mm-hmm. Makes him an extremely likable character.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you got the daughter that comes in and the nurse, and they're both kind of like, yeah, sure, you're Elvis. And they're, making fun of him. And, he's stuck in bed. And he's just like, where the hell did I go wrong here? So
it's almost as if the Mummy, it doesn't matter as much as the interplay between Ossie Davis and Bruce Campbell. That could have been a movie in itself, I think, if they didn't have but of course, you just have that extra layer. You've got that early on scene where the old lady who's the thief, and you don't really feel bad for her. You want her.
I used to say she deserved it. Oh, I love the fact when she was pawing through and she had I don't know, maybe this was a deleted scene where she opens a drawer and she's got all this stuff that she has stolen from other people.
Oh yeah,
and she pulls out a frame and it's got a little boy and she's like kind of stroking the picture, and then she takes the picture out and she wads it up and throws it away because all she wanted was the frame.
Right.
That's harsh. So yeah, maybe she did deserve it.
But then the scarab comes back for Bruce, and he calls it a big bitch cockroach.
He's trying to explain to the guy the next day. He goes, "What kind of a bug? Do I look like an ichthyologist to you?" Like, that's not it. Oh man, yeah. There's some great lines in this, and a lot of them. Again, it's in the narration, and some of that stuff just goes right over your head because it just he plays it straight.
Yeah, talking about great lines. Early on, after you're introduced to the JFK character, and Bruce late at night goes into his room and sees him face down on the floor. And that's when he sees the scar on the back of his neck. So he realizes that maybe, okay, this guy is just like me. Maybe he's on the level, right? So you get some exposition from Ossie Davis saying that this thing attacked him and it tried to steal his soul. And you can get the soul out of any major orifice of the body. And then, including your posterior. And then Bruce, classic line, where'd you read about that? Hustler? And
No, and he says, in the everyday man or woman's book of the soul, which I think is just such
which
a
he
great
just has,
name.
yeah.
Which he's moved from Book of the Dead to the everyday man or woman's book of the soul.
There you go. Yep.
And I mean, again, like just the way Ossie Davis sort of straight-facedly delivers these crazy lines when they go into the bathroom and they see the hieroglyphics, and they're this one says Cleopatra does the nasty.
Right. Pharaoh gobbles donkey goobers. At least as close as my interpretation or my translation.
But ultimately they decide to do something about it because, first of all, because they're engaged, right? They're not just laying in bed.
Well, you're right. They both realize that this is kind of, they now have a purpose.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's reinvigorated them. But that scene where they confront the soul sucker Bubba Ho-Tep in the hallway is really like that. Like as an audience member, you're like, all right, this shit real,
Elvis is standing in the hallway with his walker, right?
Yeah.
And then he starts backing back into the room, and Bubba Ho-Tep's going past him. And then Kemosabe comes out, which I love, sort of his last stand. Like he's going to take him down with his toy guns.
Yep. Yeah. Lone Ranger mask.
And he's just walking down the hall going, asshole, and shooting him with the guns. The
lighting, it was very well done. And that right there, you're like, all right, this is now kicking into high gear.
And then again, Elvis collects his Lone Ranger mask. Yeah, and it's like they're like magical items. They're like elements of people, that he's known and liked in the nursing home that are like they're giving him power, you know.
And talking about that, you're talking about engagement before. You can see Elvis being empowered, well, physically, because of he's got some stirrings down under when putting the ointment. But he tells the nurse off. He tells her off as well.
Oh yeah.
And she's like, "Oh."
I feel like we've seen her before too. I didn't look into the actress who played that.
Ella
played
Joyce.
The nurse. Ella Joyce.
I think she is so beautiful. She just, I don't know what it is about her face. You look at her and you're like, in 20 years, she's still going to be beautiful. In 40 years, she's still going to be beautiful. She just has that kind of bone structure. And she's so good in that part. But, you know, she does infantilize him, right? She does talk down to him a little bit. But at the same time, part of me is like, man, she is a nurse in like a really crappy job.
Yeah.
You know, and like she's putting up with a lot of crap. Like literal crap.
Literally.
Yeah. But then again, like they are just not monitored because Elvis and JFK managed to like get a hold of like gasoline, right?
From the gardener's shed, right?
Rubbing alcohol. Like, is anyone watching these people?
No, because the two I guess the hearse drivers were complete morons. We did see the administrator, who is Reggie Bannister, by the way.
Right.
And he just was a jerk.
He actually looks better as he gets older.
You know?
Yeah.
The scene where Elvis and JFK like get dressed, right, and they go down the hall, and the score is playing like, and they do that like hero walk. That is, I'm not even joking, bar none, one of my favorite scenes from any movie, anywhere.
Which has been done a billion times over, right?
Yeah. But I love the two of them. Like JFK is in his wheelchair, you know. Nice Elvis has got his walker. He's in his jumpsuit, and the two of them are just—they're totally serious. They're going out to take down the mummy, you know, before any more of their friends have their soul sucked away.
There you go. And I love the fact that because you see JFK's room. And it's just a treasure trove of Dallas memorabilia.
Yes.
But right down to the fact that when Elvis calls him, he's got a red hotline phone. And I thought that was such a great touch. And I'm like, all right, this guy's committed.
And we haven't really touched on the mummy itself yet. We get a flashback. Like what Joe Bob was trying to say about Phantasm between Mike and the tall man. Elvis apparently has some kind of a psychic mental connection with Bubba Ho-Tep because he sees that this mummy, the body of the mummy that was supposed to be going on a national tour, which is like the newsreel footage that you see at the very beginning, is stolen by these guys on a bus, and the bus goes off the bridge close to the nursing home.
Well, but you almost have to assume that Kemosabe had some kind of a connection because he's the one who mentioned that it was underneath the bridge.
Yeah, he does.
Early on.
He tells Elvis to go look right underneath the bridge.
So yeah, you wonder if this is affecting all of them to some degree.
And that scene actually where Elvis goes down the hill.
Oh, that's very good.
It's excruciating. You're really scared for him. You're like, he's gonna break something,
right?
Like in real life, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like because he's on this walker, like he has no control. It's a super steep hill, and of course, you know, later at the end, he does break something.
But then he had to get back up. So imagine how long that sequence would have been getting back up the hill.
2 hours later.
Yep.
But I think that does add to the feeling of, even though this is not like a super fast moving horror movie, you are scared for the residents because they can't move fast.
Right.
They can't get away. And a lot of them are like mentally incapacitated. So they wouldn't even have the ability to think about how to defend themselves, you know. So I think you just end up feeling a lot of sympathy for the people there, and they come up with this crazy plan. You know, they're gonna basically go out on the lawn and set Bubba Ho-Tep on fire, and it almost fails because Jack falls asleep in the wheelchair. And then Bubba Ho-Tep uses some unfair tricks, right? He goes behind the tree and he disappears.
Pulled a Bigfoot.
Like, what? That's cheating. But they have this very slow moving like battle on the lawn, basically. where they're trying to like hit him with the gasoline and then set him on fire. And JFK almost has his soul sucked out, but Elvis manages to show up in time. He dies, but he's at least dies with his soul intact.
Right.
And then Elvis realizes it's down to him, and he's got to take down Bubba Ho-Tep, and he does manage to. He sort of wrestles him down that scary hill again. And when he gets to the bottom, you hear bones breaking as they're going down. And he gets to the bottom, and you see like his ribs have come through his skin. But he still manages to set Bubba Ho-Tep on fire and save the nursing home. Even though, and he does die at the end. Yeah. But you still sort of feel warm about it, which is weird.
Because he says he's got his soul. He's got his soul.
I still got my soul, and he got his pride back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird movie, but it definitely.
Because he went out on a high point rather than just whimpering out. He goes out with a bang.
He saluted JFK after he passed away.
Yeah,
it is. You're right. It's got this sweet center to it. It does those two characters.
It's a very touching end. It's a very when he's staring up into the sky at the end.
And he gets all is well sign from the stars. Yeah, it's weird. It's bizarre, but
it's weird. It's funny. It's sentimental. Like I said, it's very melancholy, but like I always walk away from it. Like I feel so good after I watch this movie. It just always puts me in a good mood. It's just one of those
I can see
things.
why. I can
Too
see
bad
why.
they never made that prequel, huh?
Yeah, well, there was a lot of. Well, first of all, Don Coscarelli had added that at the end as a joke.
As a joke.
Oh, really?
He had no intention.
Really? Oh, no intention whatsoever?
Well, it was supposed to be. He said he always liked it when he saw a James Bond movie, and at the end it would say like James Bond will return, blah blah blah. And so he just wrote this little funny thing, and he said he was at some of the festivals, and when people got to that part, there would be like this roar from the crowd, like
he's like, "Oh crap, what did I do?"
And then he was like, "Okay," and then he started writing a script, and he had some ideas, and Bruce didn't really like them, and they couldn't agree on a script, and then they sort of said, "Let's not end up just liking each other over something that doesn't even have funding." Right. And then Don continued to go on and try to get something going. Paul Giamatti was going to be in it as Colonel Parker.
And he started trying to get something going as well. He was working with Don trying to get this made.
At one point they talked about Ron Perlman playing the Elvis character, but it just it never happened. Right. It just never kind of.
Although I think they could get away with not having Bruce because the Elvis character would need to be significantly younger.
But Bruce is still, especially at the time, he was only in his 40s.
Yeah, but they're still talking about making this now. So they would need to go, I think, with a younger actor. Yeah. But, that's here nor there at this point. No.
Yeah, they did try to get something made, but it never happened. And then Lansdale ended up taking some of the elements of Don Coscarelli's script, and it got turned into like a 4-issue comic.
Huh, okay.
So, but yeah, it just never happened, but it's okay. I think it's okay for this to sort of exist in its own universe without a sequel.
Right, correct. Yeah, don't water it down.
As you said, it didn't really get widely distributed theatrically. You guys saw special screenings.
Right.
They only made 32 prints of the theatrical cut.
Wow.
So that was what it was. They could not get a national distributor. They couldn't get someone who was just going to wide release it and do it, every week, one weekend at all the theaters type of thing. So what ended up happening was they got into this deal with Landmark Cinemas, and they would show it in a few key markets and see what the results were. And then if they had good feedback, they would get on the phone on Monday and say, okay, it did well, like where can we move it to? And then they basically literally walk these prints around the country, and like Don was going to some of the screenings and Bruce Campbell was going to some of the screenings, and they were like just doing everything they could. They had this real kind of like guerrilla street team thing going where Don's son like made up these little kits that got sent to people, like sort of tastemakers in different cities, and they would like put up the posters and all this stuff. And like, this is really an indie operation they had going, because they never got wide distribution on this film.
Turned into a cult classic.
Yeah, this is 100% a 5-bucket movie for me. I have so much love for this movie just across the board. So I would like to officially induct Bubba Ho-Tep into the 5-bucket club.
Yay.
Sound the fanfare. There it is.
Oofa. Wow.
It sounds like Jim feels very close to my feelings about this movie.
Yes. With a 5-bucket, we're all in agreement.
Correct.
I'm not going to give my own buckets on this.
Yep.
It is in there. 5 buckets.
Did you watch all the way through? Because on the DVD at the very end, Elvis comes back on and he says, "Be kind, rewind."
Yes.
Oh, wait, I don't think you can do that on a DVD.
You don't have to do that anymore. Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also caught in the end credits, someone got credit as a senior wrangler. So those old people must have been wily.
Also, in the copyright infringement message at the end, did you notice? You know, basically, like if you do the copyright infringement, you'll be subject to criminal liability and the wrath of Bubba Ho-Tep.
Oh, no, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
No.
I've watched this so many times.
Yeah. So Rotten Tomatoes called it the best movie to star both the King and JFK.
What more needs to be said?
Yeah. So let's take care of business.
There we go.
Let's get into our confessional this week.
Confessionals.
Christina, this is a great one, Halloween themed.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about, like, when you were a kid, what were like the top 3 candies that you wanted to get in your trick-or-treat bag? And Jim added on the fun caveat of which one did you not want? which one would you throw out if you got it? Because there was always
or snuck it into your younger
traded away.
Yeah.
So, were you guys the kind of people who sorted the candy? Because I would like dump it out.
Yeah, we always did. My kids
Oh
always
yeah.
did that as well, and like had a running sheet of how many of each they had.
And I lived in a neighborhood, because where I grew up in the village of Wappingers, approximately 85% of the people who lived around me were actually related to me. So I got a ton of full-size candy bars because they would save them for their nieces and nephews, you know, cousins.
Usually there was only like one house in the
Yes, correct. Yeah.
that did that.
No, I mean, like where my house was, my great aunt and uncle lived directly behind me. My other great aunt and uncle lived on the top floor of the other house next door to that. My other great uncle and my great grandmother lived on the bottom floor. My dad's cousin lived like on the other side of their house. My grandmother only lived 2.5 blocks away. Like literally everyone around me was either a relative or they were in the firehouse with my dad. You know, like I knew everybody for like basically on the west side of the Wappingers Creek.
So Christina, you know, obviously you're the oldest of siblings. Now, was it a flock of you that went out once they were all there on Halloween? Yeah, well, I have 4. I'm one of 4. We didn't usually go out with other people. Like, isn't having 4 kids come to your door at once enough?
We always get them in waves, though.
But yeah, so when I now, as far as candy goes, when I was a kid, I still kind of prefer this. I love sticky candy.
Really?
I love sticky candy.
We are going to disagree then on the answer.
I love caramel. Like anything like that.
Oh, caramel. Okay.
Yeah.
Caramel.
Like anything sticky like that. Yeah. No, I don't mean like.
I'm thinking like Jolly Ranchers.
No. Like not like a gummy or like a hard candy, but like something that's like sticky, like a toffee or caramel. I really like those kinds of candies. I still really like them, and luckily I've never really had cavities, so
something you can really stick your teeth into.
Dentists hate sticky candies.
Oh yeah.
So. When I was a kid, the number one thing I wanted to find was a full-size Sugar Daddy bar.
Ooh, Sugar Daddy.
You know, because
who's your Sugar Daddy?
Sometimes you would get like the mini Sugar Daddy bars, but like I always really wanted like the full-sized one, you know, because it's like it's a whole caramel bar.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I like the Sugar Daddy. I actually have to this day pajamas with the Sugar Daddy logo all the way up and down.
Are you a sugar daddy?
Oh yeah, there's a double meaning there. So
there you go. Yeah. Oh my.
So Sugar Daddy was the number one thing I wanted. And again, because I like sticky candies, my second thing was Bit of Honey. I really liked
Bit of Honey.
Wow.
Yeah.
They even make those
going
still?
obscure.
So not only do they still make them, but like I think this is something that must be genetic, because I found a few years ago I was in CVS and I found a big bag of Bit of Honey, and I brought them home
from 1976.
And no, it was fresh. They were soft.
No one has bought them.
And my son tried one. He was like, "Oh, I like these," right? So then, like shortly after I bought them, my parents came to visit, and my dad saw my son eating them, and he was like, "Hey, where'd you get Bit of Honeys from?" And then he's in the pantry.
That's like a commercial. Hey, where'd you get those Bit of Honey?
Yeah.
Don't you touch my Bit of Honey.
So it ended up being, like 3 generations of us like fighting over these Bit of Honeys that I found.
I feel like I maybe I just haven't looked for them. I just feel like
can they double as throat lozenges as well?
No, because they're chewy.
They can also double as choking hazards. You can't
just suck on them and like it's a nice soothing.
Oh, you gotta chew on them. You gotta.
They're chewy. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then the third thing that I wanted, and still one of my favorites, it was a 100 grand bar.
Oh yeah, 100 grand.
Mm-hmm.
I like those.
And again, like CVS came through for me. I was at CVS a couple weeks ago, and I saw a whole bag of 100 grand snack size bars, just 100 grand in the bag. And I was like, whoa. And I bought them.
Whoa.
And I brought them home. But guess what? Everyone in my family likes 100 grand bars, and there's only like 20 of them in the bag.
So it was like dwarves converging on that VW Beetle.
And there you go.
Exactly. So those were like my top 3 things to find in my.
Are you like extending that thought? Are you also a Snickers and a Baby Ruth fan, since they have lots of caramel?
Yes, but I actually prefer a Milky Way over a Snickers, because you get more of the caramel effect.
I see.
Because in a Snicker, I like Milky Way ice cream bars, but I don't necessarily freeze them, because I like the chewiness of the caramel is what I like. I like that texture. So in a Snickers, you lose some of that because the peanut is in the caramel. And you don't.
So I'm down with that. I'm down with that stickiness. It's not too sticky. It's not like your jaw is wired shut.
No. I like it's the caramel stickiness that I like.
Right.
Bit of Honey has the same kind of stretchiness. That's what I like about it.
The consistency.
So the thing that I did not want to find, though, and it wasn't a texture thing, it was a taste thing, were Mary Janes. I hated them. And I don't even know if you guys know what they are.
No. I don't. I know I've heard of them.
Explain.
So a Mary Jane, they're wrapped like in a yellow and red wrapper.
Right.
And
they kind of look like Bit of Honeys.
They were small, right? And the taste is peanut butter and molasses. But they were like a chewy candy. And peanut butter and molasses don't go together, okay?
Well, apparently somebody thought otherwise.
These are not 2 delicious flavors.
Molasses.
And a lot of times you'd see people would have like just a bowl of them because they were small, right? And they could just throw a couple of them in your trick-or-treat bag. I always threw those in the garbage.
I mean, what did they
come
with?
I'm good. Thank you.
Were they mixed with black licorice? It was like the garbage candy that you would
like Mike and Ike's.
It was like nobody wants this.
That's why they gave it to you. I have to be careful, because if I buy Halloween candy too early, it all disappears.
Yeah.
Yeah, my son and my wife got very big sweet tooth.
Okay, guys, tell me what you wanted in your trick-or-treat bag.
Tell me what you want, what you really, really want. Go ahead, Jim.
I liked looking for that Hershey's logo in my bag. I think the number 1 would have been the peanut butter cup, Reese's peanut butter cup.
That's my number 1.
So always looking for those. If it was a full size that had 2 cups,
oh hell yeah!
Oh, yeah. Although I would take the mini, like the little bucket shaped, the minis, the Reese's peanut butter cup. I'll take those as well if you got them. I also liked the Hershey's minis, which could have been the regular, could have been the dark. Loved the dark.
Love
Hershey's
the dark.
Mini.
Yep.
Mr. Goodbar, I learned to appreciate as the years went on.
It's got like Rice Krispie treats in it.
No, that's got peanuts.
Crackle.
Oh, Crackle has. Oh,
yeah, Mr. Goodbar was just chocolate and peanuts, and then yes, Crackle was the 4th member of the Hershey's Minis. So those are my top 2, because and that encapsulates 4 actually into my second.
Right.
And my third one is a little bit more obscure and causes a lot of people to scratch their heads because they don't like these themselves. Bottle caps. I love
baby bottle caps.
Caps.
Oh yes, I know what you're talking
about.
The
Wonka, and
like
it actually
chewy.
looked like no, it wasn't
cap.
chewy. It was a hard candy, and they were fruit flavored, and one was root beer flavored, and it looked like a soda bottle cap.
Right,
so
with
it was
the ridges
hard candy.
around it. Yeah.
Yes, I like those, and I don't know why, because I didn't usually go for hard candy. But they were Wonka brand. In terms of a candy I did not like. Now, this is where I'm getting into sticky territory. Butterfinger.
Butterfinger. You say that with like such disdain too.
Butterfinger.
I don't think of that as a sticky
No,
candy.
it's like crumbles.
Go get a Butterfinger and eat it. If you chew down on a Butterfinger, you have difficulty actually opening your mouth again. And then the stuff is stuck in your teeth. I'm talking one mini Butterfinger. For the rest of the day, you're picking Butterfinger out of your teeth. I cannot stand Butterfinger. That went right in the garbage every time.
Did you at least were you able to trade it?
No. Nobody wanted Butterfinger.
Nobody wants Butterfingers?
Nobody wanted Butterfinger. I don't even have to say this, but does anybody like those big orange circus peanut things?
No, that is on my must never own or eat.
Those are like vomit inducing.
They're so weird. Like they have like a sort of styrofoam texture.
Yeah,
like,
no,
what
it's
do
like
they even
it's like
taste
rubber.
like?
Yeah, no. Just thinking about the consistency makes me cringe.
Yeah, and I was always wary of candy that didn't come in a wrapper, like candy corn. If somebody just dumped that into your bag, even as a kid, I'm like, you've been touching this. I don't know if I want to eat this. And candy corn is okay.
I love candy corn.
It's not the worst, but for me, that texture, like that waxy kind of coating on the roof of your mouth, I could do without. But the taste of it, I do like. I do like the taste.
When you eat a candy corn, do you eat each little color individually?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And I don't know if they actually taste different, but psychologically they do. Yeah.
So I don't know if you've had candy corn lately, but like now they have sort of exotic flavors.
Do they?
Really?
Really?
Caramel candy corn, and there's like candy apple flavored candy corn, and some of them are like really improvements on the candy corn model. So we eat a lot of candy in my house. Like
you're
a lot.
aficionados.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Jim just changed my mind here because you mentioned root beer, and I love those little root beer barrels. Like
those are good.
I always feel like my grandmother always had those. But Reese's Peanut Butter Cup high on the list, like you said, especially if you got the full 2, the big size. But I love Paydays. I love it, and that's kind of like the
Paydays is kind of they're kind of unsung. The Paydays,
and especially when you get the big ones, they make like really big ones now. I'll still buy those every now and again, throw them on my lunch pail. But I like the little caramel creams.
They
also like
the little squares.
They're squares, and they got
the swirl.
The cream in the middle.
Got the cream in the middle, correct?
Yeah,
those are very good. Yes,
love those. Those I absolutely, and they have the cowtails now, but it's not quite the same because there's a different ratio of cream versus caramel. But those are my top 3. I join you on the circus peanuts, so they are horrible. And shame on you if you're out there and you're eating them. It is not food.
You are taking years off the end of your life if you're eating one right now.
How are you processing this stuff? It is like eating plastic. I don't even understand it. But I despise Mounds and Almond Joys because I hate coconut.
Oh, yeah.
I used to tell people I was allergic to coconut just so they would never ever give it to me. But I've learned to appreciate coconut shrimp. But that's about as far as I go.
I like coconut flavored ice cream, but I don't like shredded coconut.
I would not. Coconut flavored, nothing.
Coconut water? Yeah, I'll drink that. But
I like all coconut flavors.
Okay, knock your socks off. I don't.
What is our stance on the peppermint patty?
I just had one the other day because I had a customer who has a little jar of candies, and she's always go ahead, take some. And I had a peppermint patty, and to me,
it's not like eating
refreshing.
candy. It's like a Banaka shot, you know. It's
yeah, I enjoyed it.
You don't really want anything else after that, which is nice because you're not like shoving a whole bunch of them in your
right.
mouth.
It's like eating after brushing your teeth. It's like
But I like peppermint patties.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, we eat a lot of candy here. We always joke in my family because my dad's mother's side of the family, like everybody has sweet tooth, the Dimenzio sweet tooth. And we all eat sweet. My grandmother used to just eat chocolate for lunch. Like that was her lunch. She wouldn't eat anything else.
Funny.
She just had like a box of like chocolates and she would just eat a few of them for lunch. I love candy. And actually, really fun book is Candy Freak by Steve Almond. It's a nonfiction book, and he went around to all these candy factories in the country that make, almost like obscure, like regional sweets. He couldn't go to like the big manufacturers because they protect their chocolate making process a lot like it is in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where like nobody wants anyone else to see the formula, of how they make the chocolate. But he went around to all these kind of like regional companies and looked at how they make their chocolate, and like you could sort of see a lot of things that are sort of regionally popular, like moon pies and stuff like that. Very fun book if you like candy, or even if you just want to read something that's sort of fun and like season appropriate.
Well, Mark Summers
yes, I was going to say that
he had a show on Food Network, I think it was, Unwrapped.
It's very similar to what you're
and that's exactly
explaining.
what he would do. He would go to like the big processors, and he would talk about the history of the candy and the evolution of the wrappers and this and that. And sometimes
is that still on? It's not. I
don't think so. That was a while ago, and that was long after he was. Because wasn't he the original host of Double Dare?
Yes, he was. Yeah. Yes, he was. And speaking of this, it just made me think of this candy. This would definitely be on my I'm going to throw it out list. Talking about grandmas and peppermint patties. If somebody actually had the audacity to put those wrapped Andes mints in your Halloween bag, the green chocolate
that's a grandma staple.
That's definitely a grandma thing.
Oh, well, hey, as long as you're not getting rocks or apples with a razor blade in them, I think it's all good.
By the way, a lot of that is urban myth.
That was set to film in Halloween 2, right? Some kid chomps down on an apple.
Oh, really?
In it, yeah.
Is it in Halloween 2 that happens?
I think it is. Yeah, it's just a throwaway scene.
I think. I feel like a lot of stuff gets crossed in my head because Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, is so weird.
Yeah,
I've heard it's bizarre.
But
we should do that. There's so many that we do.
I know. No, seriously, we're gonna have to stop at some point. We had to put a lid on Jeff's trauma.
I'm still here. I made it the second weekend.
So what we're doing next week, a new movie, new on Netflix. What's the title of it? Is it
Vampires versus the Bronx?
So local kids discover vampires that move into the neighborhood.
Is that, so you're gonna get the Bronx attitude. Yo, go bite my neck. Oh, hey.
Much like Attack the Block, instead of aliens in this one, it is vampires.
All right.
And along with it, we are doing the classic 1992 horror film Candyman, starring the great Tony Todd.
Yeah.
When I reserved this at my library, they actually wrote back, "Are you sure?"
They did not.
Of course they didn't. Urban myth. We know you're not going to like this.
I'm excited because this is a great movie. It's a Chicago movie, and it really captures a part of Chicago at a very specific time and place. The setting is so important to this film.
We'll see.
And, I'm surprised that we haven't even touched on favorite Halloween costume yet. So maybe that should be an upcoming confession.
It could be.
Yeah. More and more Halloween mayhem to come.
Cool. Well, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello, everybody. If you liked the podcast you just heard, then please follow TMI on all of our social media outlets. First and foremost, email us at tmipodcast2018@gmail.com. That is tmipodcast2018@gmail.com.
And you can follow us on Twitter at TMI_podcast2018. Stop over, say hi, give us a compliment. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Make sure you follow us on Instagram as well, which is also TMI_podcast 2018.
And of course, we are on Facebook, facebook.com/TMI Podcast 2018. And it should be noted, we also have a community page, so join the forum.
And if you like to watch YouTube, you can see us at TMI Podcast 2018, all one word. Look for the popcorn bucket.
Popcorn bucket. Or you could just go to our website, which has every link there, TMIconfessionalspodcast.com. And we'll see you at the concession stand.
We'll save some popcorn for you.
Hey, you doing anything with those Butterfingers? Thank you. Thank you very much.